Welcome, everyone. It's really great to see you all out tonight. I wanted to, first of all, thank Georgetown East Elementary School and Maureen Marcus, who's the administrator here, for allowing us to host the event here and for being so incredibly accommodating for us to have this event here. I want to do a few logistics things. The restrooms are right across the hall. And keep in mind that these are little children restrooms, so plan accordingly. We also have some refreshments on the back table, cookies and water. And for those of you who are like me and cannot abide the thought of getting up and asking a question in a public group, if you want to stay after and have some cookies and socialize with the candidates individually and ask your questions then, that would be a perfect opportunity. Action Annapolis is really pleased to host this event. We're a bipartisan organization focused on progressive issues, and we have been very focused within the Annapolis elections on getting out the vote and voter education for the city elections. We focused on the primaries in wards 4, 6, and 7 because we'd love to see voter turnout increase. In the last primary, only 15% of Ward 7's registered voters actually voted. And to give you some context there, that's 419 people out of 2,776 registered voters. So we're really glad to see you all here. We hope that you will spread the word. This event is part of that Get Out the Vote education effort. There are terrific candidates running in all 3 of the wards we're focusing on, and you get to meet 2 of them tonight. There is a Republican candidate running for Ward 7 Alderman, David Frankel. He's not participating tonight, and we hope that you'll be informed voters and learn his position on the issues that affect the ward and affect our city. I also wanted to make sure that you are all, for any of you who came in later, that you know that we have a lot of information, voter information for you, and hope you can pick it up on your way out if you haven't picked it up already. We want to make sure you vote in the primary on September 19th. If you haven't registered to vote already, these lovely ladies over here can register you. You won't be able to vote in the primary if you register tonight, but you will be able to vote in the general election. They can also give you information on absentee ballots and how to handle that sort of thing. There's information on your polling places here in Ward 7, the Annapolis Neck Fire Company, number 8, and the Eastport Annapolis Neck Library. There's a sign-up sheet for voter information, and also, very importantly, copies of the questionnaires that our candidates filled out on issues that will give you some really good information on their positions, their ideas, and their thoughts for the future. And also, please visit our website, actionannapolis.com, and our Facebook page. We have a lot of good information, not only about all of the candidates in all the wards, but also the mayoral candidates who are running for mayor of Annapolis. So I'd like to introduce Trudy McFall, our moderator. Trudy is the co-founder and chairman of Homes for America. And I did not know that this is the 10th largest nonprofit that works with affordable housing in the country, and it's headquartered right here in Annapolis. Prior to her founding Homes for America, Trudy was the director of Maryland's Housing Finance Agency, the Community Development Administration. And prior to that, she worked as director of the HUD Office of Planning, overseeing urban planning and regional housing programs. So Trudy?
Thank you. What I really want to tell Ward 7 is my credentials, as we're the proud owners, Homes for America, of Bay Horse Senior Apartments in Ward 7. So we, one of the reasons I think I was asked to do this is because I have considerable ties to the ward. I live in Ward 2, but know a lot about Ward 7. So thank you. I forgot to do one of my most important duties today. You're being advised to carry coins in your pocket. No. Who has a coin? We need to flip a coin to see who's going to go first. That was a really important function I had. I forgot. Oh, good. Here we go. Thank you. So, ladies first, heads or tails? That's a head. So, probably. I'll pay you back later, okay? And thank you all. I want to do a couple of thank yous. Thank you to Action Annapolis. This takes a lot more work than it appears when we get to the actual meeting, and it's been fun to be a part of it. People who came away from the March on Washington and said we wanted to see what we can do in our own hometown to activate the civic voting process. So it's been fun. Thank you all for coming. You're a valuable representative of Ward 7. We are streaming it, so hopefully other people will take the opportunity to listen in as well. And I guess the only other thing I'd say is I have a lot of sympathy with these guys because I ran for mayor in 2009, and I know what it's like to sit here at the table and wait for the questions thrown at me. So I feel your pain, but I'm going to try to make this as informal and informative as I can. And one of my feelings about some of these forms is sometimes the candidates are peppered with such little teeny specific questions that you don't get a sense of who are they and what are their priorities. So I'm going to give tonight a little more chunks of 5 minutes on a series of questions so that they can talk as we will about their priorities and themselves. There'll be plenty of questions. After they do that, we will have audience questions, and I will feel free to join in or clarify or ask a question in case there's a moment when you're all too shy and quiet to ask a question. I have a few up my sleeve. So I think with that, that's really all I want to say. Thank you, look later. I don't think the crowd needs lots of talk about rules and procedures. I think we got it. That we're going to ask questions. We're going to time things though. We have a timer, and we are going to stick to that. So. Sorry, this is kind of going in and out. I'm not doing very well, am I?
No, it's not this bad. It's me. Just goes.
All right, let's try that one. Well, anyway, I'm about done talking, so that's good. So let's start, Rob, since it's you who won the talk. Let's start with you taking 5 minutes if we want to. And this is the sort of getting to know you portion of the program for the two of you. I'm going to ask you later about priorities for the ward and the city, but I think this is your chance to sort of tell the folks, what's your background? What have you done? Who are you? What brings you to this table tonight to decide to run? Why would you be a good candidate? What's your experience that can allow you to be an older person? Just tell us about yourself as you would like, in any way you would like to, for the next 5 minutes.
Okay. Sure.
Don't trip over the side.
See if this works.
Yes, you're allowed to face around too.
I don't want to hover. First of all, thank you to Action Annapolis. This is a very essential service that you're providing. Actually, this is cutting in and out too. It's okay?
Yeah.
I could just not use it. But is it
You're fine with that.
It's a little hopeful.
You can move up closer.
is this tied into the video feed at all, or should I?
Oh.
No.
Well, then let's try without it and talk loud and protest if you feel like you can't hear, or move forward.
Move forward.
That would also be a good start. That over again.
Sure. So thank you.
Sure. So that was a technical timeout.
So thanks again for the service you're providing to the community. This is definitely, I think, the most attention I've seen in municipal races in a while. I'll speak up more. I do have a lot.
Yeah, try this.
Oh, I'll try to use the mic. But thank you again for all your patience with Action Annapolis, and to Trudy as well. You know, this is our third speaking event today, and so I apologize. I'm probably going to use notes at some point because it's been a long day. But also thank you to Trudy for letting us know about the format beforehand. The previous forum we didn't know, and it was a bit stressful. So anyway, I'll start by just going into my background. I have lived here for 16 years with my wife Becca and my son Whit. And I attended school in the Eastern Shore, Washington College. I studied environmental science, and I minored in business management. And so that's where I really learned about and fell in love with the Bay. And then I moved to Annapolis. That's where I started my career. And I started my career with the Chesapeake Bay program, working on the Bay restoration efforts. And from that period of time, I continued to work for private consulting field, and then I went on to work for local government. I worked for the city of Annapolis as their environmental compliance inspector and also their sustainability coordinator. And then I went on to work for Anne Arundel County, which is where I am now, a project manager with Anne Arundel County. So, things really got interesting for me when I worked for the city of Annapolis. Again, I was their environmental compliance inspector. And one of my jobs was to review development projects. And one of the projects I reviewed was one called Parkside Preserve. It's in our ward, Ward 7, down Forest Drive a little ways. It's about 155 units. But what I found out when I was doing that review was that the city was basically allowing developers to avoid following the law. The law says they're supposed to protect certain types of forests in the city, and the city was allowing them to clear these protected forests, or city and state protected forests. So as a reviewer, I decided, I spent many years internally for about 3 years, trying to get this resolved internally. Nothing worked, so I stood up. I went to the newspaper, issued a 12-page report documenting what I perceived as violations with the law, and we got things resolved. We stopped the bulldozers, and now we're actually going to have a new park formed on this property. It hasn't stopped it entirely, but it did protect this forest in question. So I bring up that story because it wasn't easy. I risked my career in local government doing that. And I risked my livelihood of my family by doing that. But I knew, just by looking at my son, that I had to do the right thing for his future and the future of all the children in Annapolis. But I didn't just stop there. After I successfully blew the whistle and we got that forest protected, we went into, I worked with some of the city and council members, and we got some new laws passed. We got some new forest conservation laws passed. And they're actually some of the strongest laws in the state. We also had some other additional legislation that we passed, as no net loss ordinance. But the reason I bring that up is to sort of show that I've just sort of, like my slogan is a proven commitment. I bring it up to show that I'm committed to you and committed to the ward to make positive change. And that really shows the kind of integrity that I have, or that I will have when I'm elected, if I'm elected into office. So I'm running as well because I enjoy serving the public. I'm professionally, as I said, I'm a public servant, but also personally I've been a community organizer for nearly 20 years, working on all kinds of issues, social justice issues, a large focus obviously on environmental issues. But what that brings is sort of a perspective, an orientation on the public, on the people. And I like to combine that with my science perspective, which brings reliance on data, facts. And I'm looking forward to bringing that to the council. And so tonight, hopefully, I'll be able to relay a vision to you tonight, and hopefully you'll agree and get on board with that vision tonight. So thank you. Thank you for coming.
Seconds to spare. Alexis, I didn't do very well with introductions, but I guess it's pretty clear from the signs. So Alexis, would you please share whatever you would like to share yourself?
If I don't take myself out. So as she said, my name is Alexis Villegas. I am running for Alderwoman here in Ward 7. Does everyone here live in Ward 7? Do we have a lot of... So I think it's great that... Good. So we had... Yeah, it's going in and out, I guess.
Thank you.
So I wanted to first say thank you to Georgetown, of course, and to Action Annapolis and everyone who's put this together. Thank you, Trudy, for moderating. I think it's great that we all have an opportunity to actually have some choices in our primary, which we normally don't have choices, and to be able to hear from us on what is important to us. So a little bit about me. I am actually, I live here in Ward 7 with my husband. He's active duty military, and we have a young daughter who just started kindergarten yesterday. It's harder for me than her. So we absolutely love Annapolis. We are looking to buy a house. This is our forever home. This is the place that we adore for the water, the scenic views, the beautiful, diverse businesses and recreational opportunities here. And so I am, by trade, the work that I do, I'm a legal professional. I've been a legal professional for about 10 years. I'm a paralegal. I've worked in criminal defense, personal injury with disability. I work in immigration law currently, and I previously worked at a lobbying firm working on legislation, regulatory issues, and local lobbying efforts. So I have a great breadth of experience in the legal field and with the gaps that we have at all levels of government. I've worked with city, county, state, and federal governments on different legislative issues, regulatory issues, and I feel like I have that, I bring with me that experience. But in my personal life, in my free time, whatever that may be, whenever my husband was deployed and I was raising a daughter and going to school and working, was I would volunteer a lot, and I still do it. It is something that from a young age was important to me, from Kiwanis in second grade to JCs now. I'm on the nonprofit board of the JCs. I am on the Women's Commission for Anne Arundel County, and I constantly work tirelessly to help improve the quality of life for women and children in our county, and I work to I actually roll up my sleeves whenever a leader, part of being a leader is actually sometimes just rolling up your sleeves and getting the job done. And so for me, that's a lot, public service is very important to me, and that's a lot of what I do in the community and a lot of what has qualified me and taken me here. Now, I would say if there's one turning point that led me here, it was when I was living over at Quiet Waters, which is another part of this ward. We had a package stolen off of our porch. I thought, well, that was weird, but I'm sure it won't happen again. You know, it's a great neighborhood. And then a few weeks later, my car was broken into. And so then suddenly I started to think to myself, is this escalating or is this just a one-off event? I mean, we're a closed-off neighborhood, no way. Then one morning, as my husband's about to leave for work, a shot rang out in front of my house. One of my neighbors had just left for work and was robbed at gunpoint. He fought off the assailant, and thankfully the bullet missed him. But it was a wake-up call that we were not just experiencing crime that can happen anywhere. We were having an issue that was escalating. And as I delved deeper into the issues within the city and watching the council and what they were doing, I realized that we had some serious issues in the city that were getting worse or were not being fixed. And I looked at the council and I saw there were two women. There weren't young people in their 30s. There were not the representative voices for our city and for our wards. Were very diverse in age, in gender, and in our backgrounds. So I believe that by coming forward as a voice for women and for working families in this city, I can help make a bigger change for everyone. I care about the environment, I care about improving our public safety, and I care about investing in our children and ensuring that we have a positive and robust economy. So for me, it's that I don't think that our issues are mutually exclusive. I think they're all interconnected, and we need a candidate who's willing to be a leader to ensure that we are addressing all of our issues and caring for everyone who lives in this ward.
Thank you. Those are really two inspiring backgrounds that have led you to decide to run for office. I want to say, to a personal word, in that it takes a lot of guts to run for office, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of both of those commodities to serve as well. So for both of you who I don't believe have ever run for election before, congratulations. It's wonderful that you've stepped up, and this ward is very lucky to have a choice of candidates. One of the things about Annapolis is it hasn't had many people willing to step forward, as you say, and diversity in the people who do step forward. So I hope the two of you represent the future of people who will run in Annapolis. So thank you for that background. Okay, so now we're going to make you work a little harder, and let's reverse the order and let Alexis go first this time. And now let's turn to the ward itself and take 5 minutes if you want and tell us what do you think are the big issues and concerns, and also most of what would you do about it? You mentioned the crime. I'm sure you want to talk about that some more. But if you were elected, what would you do about these issues that you perceive to be important to the ward and that you care about?
So when we all start running, we have these platforms that we're running, right? We have these ideas of what is important. But one thing that's great about running is over time, you meet hundreds of your fellow neighbors and they tell you what's important to them. So I've slowly adjusted and added things to my platform to ensure that every resident is being heard. Because number one, for me, is going to be transparency and accountability within our government. I will hold town halls. I've already started a newsletter, which some residents are on, which it's local stuff going on, like a concert or a play, and also what's going on at City Hall, because I think it's important that our citizens are knowledgeable and in the know, really just knowledgeable on what's going on in the city. So for me, it'll be everything that we do, from data, from providing our data publicly to our citizens, to letting them know whenever something is going in across the street, like the Starbucks. I think it's important that we have those lines of communication and they're always freely flowing. Now, public safety, as I mentioned, we definitely have a lot that we need to do. I would immediately invest in training for our officers. They need a bigger budget for that. I would immediately look at ways to find funding mechanisms for increasing our police and fire, because they do need more firefighters. They need 4 per truck, and right now we have about 3. So we need 4 so we can ensure that we have proper public safety protocols and infrastructure in place. And then I would also, of course, increase community policing beyond what's already been done. And I would also support a civilian review board so we can hold our officers accountable and give our citizens a voice in what's going on with regard to their public safety. Now, quality of life kind of includes everything, right? We have recreation, which I would love to invest more in recreation, make more free, affordable options available to our citizens, because those citizens who need recreational options, enriching options the most, can't afford it. So making it accessible and open, and then offering additional options for those who are Hispanic or Latino who speak Spanish. We need to have some options that are inclusive to everybody, so we are reaching all sections of our population, because right now, that's also included with our crime. If we look at our crime, it's very closely related to socioeconomic status. And one thing I'll say about these Spanish-speaking youth in our city, we have an issue with gangs. And if we can keep children safe, and we can give them enriching and safe places to go, we can help stem that issue. It will improve our quality of life, and it will improve our public safety. So then I'd say with the environment, there are many low-hanging fruit things that I think we could do in our ward and across the city, like public compost, like residential composting citywide. Things like that are low-hanging fruit that we can implement in order to reduce our carbon footprint and reduce our waste and ultimately make our city a cleaner, more breathable city. Then, in addition to that, we're going to have to work on obviously finding funding mechanisms for some of our serious requirements within the next decade to implement our WIP and to ensure that we are cleaning up our waters. And I would love to make them swimmable and fishable, because it's not just that they need to be clean so we can come into compliance. They also need to be clean so we can actually enjoy the water that we live on. We live on water, and how many of us can enjoy it? My husband loves to fish, and if it rains, he has to wait a certain period of time before he fishes because he can't eat that fish, because it's advised that you could potentially get sick. So I think that there are certain things that we can do to improve everybody's quality of life on a day-to-day basis with regard to the environment. And then those longer-term issues we will need to address. That will be the challenge for the council, by finding a way to fund them that is least impactful on you. Because the last thing we want to do is take a bunch of steps at City Hall that really just hurt your pocketbook. We need to be creative, we need to be leaders, we need to be partners, and we need to partner with nonprofits and other groups to get our job done and to ensure that we're improving everyone's quality of life. Thank you.
Same question to you.
So I have been focusing on 3 different areas. I see 3 different areas for sorry. My campaign is focused on 3 different areas for improvement. One of them is open and responsive government. I also want to hold town hall meetings. I can speak up. It's not working here. So I also want to hold town hall meetings. I want to use my community organizing background to do that, and send out newsletters, that kind of thing. But that's why I stood up when I worked for the city. Another part of that story, which I told you, is that they actually were telling staff to keep things off the record. As a public employee, still a public employee, I felt that was a violation of the trust that the public holds in me. I am your servant. And to keep things off the record was completely irresponsible. So I didn't obey that. I just spoke up anyway. So that's what I bring in terms of fighting for open and responsive government. The other part of it is, another focus of mine is on quality of life. So development is a big pressure here. It's a big threat to our quality of life here in the ward. Depends on if it's done the right way or done the wrong way. We have a number of new developments coming in. We have Bembe Beach development down Edgewood Road, which is about 42 units. We have the Lidl grocery store across the street, Starbucks, a retirement center across the street, development next to the hardware store. I can go on and on. There's a lot coming in. But the important thing is that I think what I want to push for is that the city makes sure that it hears and listens to the residents who live here. Because I feel like the development risks overcrowding our schools, it risks degrading our environment, and it risks increasing our traffic. So that's why the city needs to actually listen to those of us who live here and comply and adhere to our comprehensive plan. So, for example, I worked with the Lidl grocery store trying to get them to adjust their development plan to fit more into the community. I worked with the Bay Village Retirement Center, which is behind the CVS, which should be getting in there in the next few months, I imagine. But that development ended up making significant improvements to fit better into the community. So there are also, underneath this quality of life umbrella, I also like to put environment. And so with that, we are in the headwaters. Back Creek is the center of our ward. We have a watershed, a Back Creek Conservancy, which does some great work here. I'd like to support them. I'd like to see the city support them more. And we have stormwater management issues we have to deal with in the city. We have a federal pollution reduction target we need to meet by 2025. That's estimated that's going to cost us about $20 million for the entire program. But that's essential work, because that's what we need to do to help clean up our creeks. And I also want to make sure that we have fishable, swimmable waters at any time of the year for all of our children here in Annapolis. We also have water access. That's an important issue for me as well. Everybody needs to have access to our creek around here. It's public safety. I also see that as a quality of life issue. We've had some homicides here over at the Reserve of Quietwater's apartments. We've had, and I think all of our neighborhoods have probably had some kind of break-in, whether it's vehicle or car. So what I would like to do with that is to help get the word out to the public. The police department actually has a number of crime prevention activities and programs for people to engage in. I like to try to facilitate that. And also, I do support the creation of a civilian review board, because I think that's part of rebuilding the trust between the police department and the public. And but it's not just about adding police. I think we also need to improve our recreation program. So I do not support any effort to privatize the rec center, because I think we need to keep that accessible and affordable to people. And I also want to work with our local maritime industry down Edgewood Road to increase the availability of job training and actual jobs themselves here in the ward. I also want to have a vision for improving the Ward 7 beyond that. I want to increase public art in our neighborhoods and also work on mobility. We have a number of senior apartments and buildings in the ward, but we have sidewalks that are in disrepair, and we have a bike plan, master bike plan, that's sitting on the shelf and not getting anything done with it. So I'd like to work on both of those issues, as I did when I was a city employee as a sustainability coordinator. And I'll use my government knowledge to help get that done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna throw you a little surprise moment here. We're gonna have a little 1-minute round that relates to this gathering tonight. You heard the statistics about Ward 7 and the number of folks who vote versus the registered voters. So how about you take a minute each, and we'll go back to Alexis first. I don't know, I guess for this to be very good, Rob first. For a minute, what would you do to get more civic involvement? What do you think is happening in Ward 7? You're not noticed for being a hotbed of civic engagement. What could you do about that? What do you think? Well, let's make that one short, and then we'll go back to our last 5-minute segment. So,
Okay. It's a tough question, but given my background in community organizing, we have to deal. I've dealt with that on a number of issues, whether it be with the Annapolis and Peninsula Federation, just getting people turned out to meetings. It's tough. I think you need to get people. It's like a civic engagement is sort of like a muscle. You have to exercise it, get people warmed up to the idea. And so that's what I will try to do is use I'm going to continue door knocking, even if I win, to continue talking to voters, because part of it, I think, is they're not aware you can make a big difference in your local elections on the city council. We vote on a lot of important issues that are before people. But I also support keeping the election during 2017, during the off year. There has been some talk about putting it during the gubernatorial or presidential, but I don't like that idea. I mean, yes, you would increase turnout, but I think on the other hand, you would get people wouldn't really pay attention. We'd be at the bottom of the ballot. People wouldn't pay attention to city elections at all. And I think the more opportunity people have to vote and participate, the better we'll be as a democracy.
Thank you.
So I remember back to when I was 11 and I was working on Gore's campaign. I have continued to do work like that within the community on getting out the vote and getting people engaged. And one thing that I think is important is to make people understand what their power is and what they're voting for. So at the city level, people need to know what we do and why it's important to them. And I have a lot of experience in working on get out the vote efforts, because for me, regardless of who you're voting for, I just want you to vote. Women fought hard so I could vote. People of color fought hard so they could vote. And it is absolutely critical that we exercise that last line of defense. At the city level, it is absolutely critical. I understand if someone doesn't want to be involved at the federal level, but at the city level, your vote, your voice can literally change the whole course of a piece of legislation. And so I would also, I'm planning to do what Rob would do. In the event that I win, I will make sure to continue knocking because I want to keep hearing from my residents. So, thank you.
Alexis, if you want, you're going to go first next, so you can stay right there, and I will ask the question. The third and last 5-minute segment, before we'll get some more shorter questions, would be the one about the city. Sort of, presumably you didn't decide to run to be an alder person because you thought everything was perfect in the city of Annapolis. So it would be interesting if both of you would start and say, what kernel of city issues or behavior or process kicked off you to say, I really could do that better. I want to get in that mix. And then if you could also share with us any thoughts flowing from that of the kinds of issues that you see facing the city council and your views on what you might do about some of those issues.
Sure, Rob, you don't need to go first. So that's a difficult one. I see where we get 5 minutes to that. So I would say that whenever I was regularly going to city council meetings for the very first time, I remember watching as on some issues they would go back and forth for hours. There would be public testimony and passion, and then they wouldn't make a decision. The most recent example is Market House. I remember sitting there for 3.5 hours, and then they just couldn't move forward. And while I think it's important that we deliberate and we listen and we critically think about the decisions we're going to make, the challenge of government is making sure that we make them in a timely manner, in an efficient manner. And so I started realizing that, I know I'm not disillusioned, or I don't have any illusions about what City Hall is. I've worked in government, I've worked on legislation. I know it takes a long time, I know that it takes coalition building. I've done this. I've worked with stakeholders and brought people together to work on issues. So I understand that the process is complicated and difficult, but I do believe that we can do it better and that we can listen and serve more people, because I feel like a lot of our focus is not always on every single citizen, on the issues that some of our citizens are facing in this city. With regard to our city, we have many people who are living very different realities. Very different realities. I have a woman who's door knocked and she's a single mother who recently became unemployed, and she has 2 children, and she lives in a house. And she doesn't know what she's going to do. She doesn't know how she's going to feed her children. And those are the citizens that I feel like don't have enough of a voice in this city, that we're not looking after in a way that we could. But in addition to that, I think that, overall, we could be doing a better job to just care for every issue. Because at the city level, we can't disaggregate into committees. I can't just go off to the Environment Committee. I can't just go off to the Budget Committee. We will obviously have our committees, but what I'm saying is, as city council members, we need to be concerned about the whole health of the city. And I feel like there's not enough of that going on in every single ward. So I think that we need to get strong leaders in there who really care about everyone in the community and are willing to put forward the work and the political will to get the job done and to really, advance our quality of life here in Annapolis. So, and what was your second question?
What issues? What do you see as the most pressing issues that the city is facing, will be facing in the next 4 years?
That's a big one. But we obviously, one of our biggest issues will be the environmental issue as far as the money that we're going to need to raise. It's in a very short time, and so we are going to need to get smart and creative, and we're going to need to build those partnerships. I think a big issue for us is a lot of these developments that we have coming in are going to drop at some point. And what are our public adequate facilities going to look like? What are we looking at down the road if we don't really take serious steps now to plan for our future and to reassess our zoning? Because our schools were just redistricted. How long before they are again? And I know that that disrupts communities, it disrupts youth. And so for me, I believe that we should be taking those steps now to ensure that we're not going to have those issues later. And then budgetary needs. We are a city that only has so much money. We can't just raise our debt ceiling. That's not how it works here in our government. So it's going to be a challenge for our next administration to figure out how we can spend wisely and then where we can find ways to pay for things without, again, dropping that in the laps of our constituents, because there are many constituents who are already stressed or who have already moved out of the area or plan to because they just can't afford to live here anymore. So we need to find ways to keep that character and the diversity that makes our city so great, while also improving upon the current facilities and improving our quality of life.
Thank you. Well, while you're standing up, I'm going to share with you, I can't resist sharing with you what it was that prompted me. For those of you who've lived here a long time, we debated chickens in the backyard for weeks, and yet did we ever talk that long about poverty or public housing or the budget or crime, and I said something is wrong here. So I got into a mix partly over chickens. And I think in the end about 2 people had chickens in their backyard. So and with that, Rob, you're on.
So for me, it was kind of an organic thing that developed over the years, because for most of my time in Annapolis, and even before I was in Annapolis, I was sort of agitating on the outside. I was an advocate. I was a community advocate, and just pushing and probably aggravating those elected officials on issues. And once I started working for the city, I guess that started to change a bit. Because as an employee with the city, I was able to draft legislation, and that showed me it's not that hard to do. But also, when going back to the whole whistleblowing story, that gave me an opportunity to work with our existing council members on legislation, and many times since then, I've helped them draft legislation as well. But I've also built coalitions in support of various pieces of legislation. So to me, that's just developed into me wanting to run. I think, I got to know these guys and well, in our ward, guys, I guess, but in the sense that they
we'll take it generically.
Yeah. But they're just like you and I, and I think everybody should take an opportunity to run for office one day. But to get at the second part of the question in terms of the top city issues, again, I want to go back to development. Because one thing I'd like, which actually came from John, when John and Maryland Crabs had their interview with the mayor, and I liked how they framed the question about development. Because they asked, development, it's a balance between private property rights, but also the rights of citizens in terms of our quality of life, right? But I think one thing I've learned from working with the city is that balance is way off in the developer's side. I saw where we have our moderately priced dwelling unit program, the city would routinely give them variances to that program. And I think everybody would probably agree we need more affordable housing in the city for a lot of people. I saw developers come in and bully staff and bully city commissions. They actually got some city commissioners kicked off the commission simply for going out to a project site and doing an evaluation. That kind of behavior I can't tolerate, because I think the city government needs to be accountable to the people. First known, the people, not these powerful special interest developers. So what I would do to work on that issue would be I would support the creation of a moratorium on large development projects, especially on our Forest Drive corridor. The city's doing a sector study to find out what kind of development the corridor can handle, but they're still allowing all this development to come in. And the problem is it's all getting done at once, and they're not looking at that collective impact about how that's going to impact our traffic or our schools or our environment. I also support downzoning in certain cases. I think we may need to downzone, or even upzone, but I think we need to give downzoning a serious look. Say, well, maybe they shouldn't be able to allow it to build 400 units, maybe 100 or 50 is more appropriate. So there's also another top issue, our environmental and infrastructure. So for that, I mentioned stormwater earlier, and that's a part of how we're going to restore our creeks and our watersheds. But the big question is, how are we going to pay for it? I also see land preservation as an important issue, because if we keep allowing our forests and our wetlands to be cleared, that's going to directly impact and prevent us from being able to clean up our waterways. So the other big issue is climate change. Even the U.S. Naval Academy is predicting at minimum 3 to 4 feet of sea level rise by 2100. 3 to 4 feet of sea level rise by 2100. So that would make basically Hurricane Isabel, if you remember what happened downtown, that would be a 25-year occurrence for our city. But I want to end on just saying, I think something that brings together all those issues I mentioned, the quality of life, the environment, the development, are sort of, I didn't get the chance to talk about crime, but crime's another issue, but something that brings together all of those, I see those under the environmental umbrella. We've got environmental justice and social justice that are very closely related. And I just tell a quick story. When to describe this, I ran into 2 young African-American boys who were fishing, and I said, "Hey, how you doing? Did you catch anything?" And they said, "No, the cops were called on us." And that broke my heart. They're a few years older than my son, but it shows the importance of water access. Right? They were doing a positive experience, positive activity, trying to enjoy our resource, the treasure, the Chesapeake Bay, and the cops were calling them. So that shows you, I think, if we increase access, that's going to make them want to learn more about the Bay. That's going to give people recreational opportunities to enjoy the Bay. And I'll just end it there. But we can't do any of that without a clean Bay and clean creeks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That completes the leisurely portion of the program. Now, questions from the audience. If you get shy, I'll throw in one, but let's start, and I'm sure you have. Please, we sometimes things we care about, we start out and we think we're going to ask a question and we find we're making a speech. So a question, hopefully a minute or less for a question, and then we're going to try to make this a little faster answers. So a couple, 2 minutes then for the answers. So Anybody got a question? Yes. And I think if you would please, you introduce yourself to
My
us.
name is Karen Waltz, and I'm an immigrant. I had a story on Main Street. I love this city when I came. I come from Berlin, Germany.
Yes, and because the candidates have to be able to hear the question too.
I'm an immigrant. I come from Berlin, Germany. I was born in 41. There are the other Americans you mentioned too, Afro-Americans. I see one. Where's the education for our citizens? I had to make my citizenship. I grew up under the Marshall.
You got 1 minute, so if you don't get a question out, that'll be your time. So just
Educate
bear that in
the
mind.
public. They don't know nothing. They don't know how your this government works. Education is everything. I'm 76 years old. I saw somebody. I worked already. I said, I'm going to run. I had enough of this. Yeah.
Do you have a question? We're going to have to stop if you don't get to the. This is to ask
Where
a
is
question.
our education and government?
Okay, so we have,
People like us,
thank
our
you.
age.
So we have a question about what about education? Okay,
Yes,
thank you very
to
much.
learn about our government. We the people, by the people.
Thank you,
Yes,
thank you.
so the people.
Thank you very much. 2 minutes each. You know what? I almost can't keep track of who goes first. Do you care? Where were we? Who finished?
Rob goes
You don't seem to either of you have any difficulty with answers or needing to one up the other one, so it doesn't seem like it's mattering a whole lot. But each of you will answer those questions.
So I heard a question there about how to help the immigrant community become aware of public services and become educated about what's offered. No.
Okay.
I'm an immigrant. I got educated
Just,
in Germany.
we've done with the question part. Just proceed on to the answer.
Okay.
Do the best you can with what you heard, then let's
Okay.
go.
Well, so I heard an education question in there as well. So I do want to increase. So I supported the non-discrimination ordinance that was passed in the city. It was an ordinance that was passed that basically said that the city has to be able, legally has to be able to provide services to people without any kind of basis or question about immigration status or foreign place of origin, anything like that. So the city has to be able to provide services. We did that to try to build the trust between everybody in our community, because we want everybody in the community to feel free to be able to call the police department or the fire department and not have to worry about getting deported. I supported that. I went and testified in support. But in terms of education, that's also a very important issue we have, and that's why I supported an ordinance and helped build a coalition of some education advocates to address school overcrowding. Because previously, the city didn't have any kind of limit. Developers were able to come in, build whatever they wanted, and some of our schools were put way over capacity. Tyler Heights was over, I believe, 125% capacity. They had a number of trailers in the back of their schools. This school is actually under capacity. So we finally did get some redistricting, but the law now says that the developers can't build new development unless there's capacity for the schools. Now, it was weakened a little bit at the last minute, so there's some improvements to be made, but I do support increasing access to public education.
Thank you. What was your name again?
My name is Karen. I was asking about the government education, how our government works.
Well, what I think you're onto something there. There are definitely things that we could do within the city to ensure that our students are learning about city government and how it works. It's not unheard of to have special tailored programs depending on the area. So where I'm from, in Missouri, where I grew up, I'm not from here, but I love it here. Anyway, so where I grew up, our schools are piecemeal school districts. And so basically we are smaller. It's not county-wide. Here it's county-wide, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't do something at the city level within our schools to educate our youth on the civics, on how to deal with the local government and how it works. And then additionally, I would say education is a key for informing our voters and making them a part of the process. Whenever we talk about environmental reforms, getting our constituents invested in our policies and programs is going to require us coming to our constituents and informing them on why it matters to them and what it means for them. Because I think in order to get that investment, people need to know what's going on and they need to feel like they have a voice in it. So education is absolutely key for anything that we're going to try and do at the city level, and it is a big part of every policy that I have so far put together and planned out. So, thank you.
Thank you. Question? Thanks.
Just clarify on your performance tonight, and also to say that this board is very lucky to have two such qualified candidates. But my question is, you can't get anything done unless you have 5 votes. Everything requires 5 votes. So we could have a completely new council, very different, and I'm wondering how you see yourselves coming right out of the box and get the coalition built.
So I will say all of us in this city election have definitely been working together really well, which I think is great. We have some wonderful people running in other wards. And if all of the new people running ran, we could potentially end up with only one incumbent, which would be a very steep learning curve for the entire council. So we are definitely, already working together. And I believe that upon entering office, whoever enters office, we're going to have some of the votes we need, because a lot of these issues are the same across all wards. A lot of these issues we've been hashing out and speaking about, especially the Democratic candidates. We've been working together to ensure that we're all on the same page, we all have the same goals and vision for this city. And we may have different ways that we want to get it done, but I think generally we're supportive and we're open, because one thing that I think is important that I noticed at the council, that I didn't mention earlier, is that the council, I felt like I would show up and they would be holding a vote. You would think something's going to happen, and then someone would change their vote. And I think that was just a sign that sometimes we don't have that open communication, or we don't have the relationship to be true with people. I'm my authentic self. I only say what I mean, and that is what I will bring to the council. I will ensure that we're being clear with one another. We're being truthful with one another. We're holding each other accountable, because whenever we want to get something done, we need to ensure that we're on the same page, and if we're not, we need to figure out a way that we can work towards that goal. So the open responsiveness to each other, I think, is going to be a key. But I think we're all on the same page there.
I don't have a problem working with and building coalitions. I mean, that's what I've done. And even in my home, I by no way am in control of the household. She's right there. I have to build coalitions with her. But, professionally, I mentioned the forest conservation laws we got passed. That was by building a coalition of diverse environmental groups. Some who wanted an ideal law passed, which I want something ideal passed too, but we had to sort of get it amended to something everybody could agree upon. And we actually succeeded in that. And we got those laws passed it was near unanimous support on the council. I think a couple people abstained. But there was no objection. I think that shows the effectiveness of being able to come forward with a strong coalition. And that's what but I think it's more than just striking a coalition on the council. I think it's about striking a coalition with the public. The public needs to be included in these decisions as well. And because that's one thing I think a lot of the council members, they don't have that perspective. They're often, a legal background or small business owner doesn't really necessarily think about that, but an organizer does. An organizer builds with support with the public first, gets the public on board, and then goes to the council and tries to get the law passed. And also, I think with local elections really should be nonpartisan, because there aren't really too many Democrat-Republican issues when you get down to it, at least on this local level. And because everybody wants to improve their schools. Hopefully everybody wants to improve their creeks and streams and reduce crime, but it's about people's background, it's about their method and how they're going to accomplish what they say they're going to accomplish.
Did you want to take a follow-up question?
I just had a question, and I have tremendous respect for military spouse as not just a title, it's a role, and but when did your husband PCS? That he would change
January of 2011. January of 2011,
Okay.
he PCS'd, and it's because we wanted to come here. We absolutely loved Maryland. We visited, but we knew that that's where we wanted to go. The field my husband's in, I can't tell you what he does, but I will say that.
Oh, you'd have to kill me?
Yeah, exactly. So it's.
So there's no change of duty station for you.
There's
You're
no
here.
change of duty
Okay.
station, and just on a private note, that's not so private anymore, my husband has some health challenges and he will be unfortunately retired from the military after 14 years. So for me, it's definitely been a great ride, and I've learned to be very resourceful. And I've learned to adapt and to, come to new places and love them and adopt them as my home. But Maryland and Annapolis are absolutely our forever home, regardless of the outcome of this election. So.
Thank you.
I don't know what to do with that today. Would you like to tell us more about the coalition building in your home? Or you want to pass on
That
that?
might give me a trouble.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, and this is supposed to be a tough question. So if it's a tough question, I've succeeded. So I read all your questionnaires, and people ask you in the questionnaire and the forums all the things you're for, and we're for all these good ideas of new programs and new this and new that. But we are in a city with a budget crunch now and a bigger crunch to come in the future, apparently. What would you do? You talk about things you don't want to do, you don't want to crack. But what would you do? What would you drop if you were in the council and forced to decide what should we drop, or I will say, should we eliminate? What should we privatize, if anything, or what should we consolidate with the county? In other words, what efficiencies, money-saving things would you think would be viable for the city of Annapolis as we cope with our budget expansions? Right now, we're just apparently coping by mostly pushing off the debt to the future by issuing debt and letting somebody else figure it out. But the day is coming when the council members have to start making some decisions to make our expenditures fit our budget and our priorities. So, if each of you would take 2 minutes and tell me now, this one, who went last? We're going to let Rob have the start on this because you didn't get to talk about your military status.
Okay.
Thank you.
For me, and I'm coming at this as a government employee, I think cuts would be a last resort for me, because I know it affects people very personally, people who live in our community. I'm not completely opposed to it, but I'm just saying to be a last resort. What I would want to look at and I also don't generally support privatization of our city resources, because when we privatized trash collection, I don't think that went too well. Granted, we did save some money, but then again, we did lose some accountability. People, we don't have quite as much ability to talk to our garbage man collector and to let them know, give them feedback, that kind of thing. So, and I also, again, oppose privatizing the rec center. Parking has been privatized, and now we have a situation where the city gets, let me get my numbers wrong, they get about, I think, over $10 million in parking revenue. That's how much they bring in. But based on this new contract, they only get about $40,000 worth out of that. So I think that may be a situation where that privatization hasn't worked. I've also spoken to some former employees who used to work for the parking, but then they got carried over to work for the private company, and they're telling me all kinds of issues with that privatization. So again, cutting services is certainly the last resort, but I would prefer to look at it. There could be a couple opportunities where we could save money. One would be to piggyback on certain aspects of the county's stormwater program. Just because of economies of scale, they have a much more advanced program. I'd like to look at possibly piggybacking on the county's health insurance. Because I've having worked for the city and for the county, I can compare the health insurance policies. And the city may have an opportunity to save some money there. But I also want to look at raising more funds. I'm not talking about raising taxes, but I'm talking about getting a sales tax downtown. The city gets all its money from property taxes. We don't get any kind of money from sales tax. We need to come together with other cities in the state and push our General Assembly to
That'll be the end of your list for now.
All right.
You'll get another chance. There'll be another question, and I'll slip it in.
So I would want to pivot this. So whenever I spoke with Mr. Fernay, this is my moment of redemption because I didn't finish my thought whenever he asked me this question. Now, I think that almost any cut in the city would be detrimental. So one of the first things I would do if we were really in dire straits is to find more funding. Working with the legislature, year after year, I would watch as the mayor of Annapolis went into the Anne Arundel County delegation and told them that we needed our money because they're the seat here and they cost us a whole bunch of money. And then they would make us, tell them why we need the money. And every year it was like a big surprise that the only way we get money is through property taxes. Well, not the only way, but it's a big part of it. So we're not getting a sales tax from all of the tourist economy and the people that are coming down to go to the Capitol. So first off, that used to go up. It used to go up. It was compulsory. And now it does not go up like it needs to. We need to ask for a raise from the state because we have things that we're paying for that they are absolutely obligated to pay us for. So things like a bomb squad year round, or the strain on our infrastructure because of the many cars and people coming within our city. So there are certain things that we can do to work to increase that at the state level, and then also reassess our relationship with the county, because we're paying a lot of money to them as property owners, right? We're paying a fair amount of our property taxes to the county. And so we need to reassess what services they're providing and what our money is paying for from the county. Obviously schools, but we need to look beyond that. So I would first pivot and say that we need to look at other options for funding. So also the nonprofit partnerships and things like that would be key. And then after that, we would really have to do a full assessment before I would propose any potential cuts to our city. But I would never cut fire or police officers. I would never cut public safety. So I just want to.
Thank you. Okay. How about a question from one of you? Now, just give me a chance to see if we got anybody else, if you wouldn't mind. This is, I'm taking some liberties because we know each other, and she's a Bay Forest resident. Thank you.
Hello. I'll bring this up. I didn't really think about it, but with the new City Forest Conservation Act, we used to have a forester who worked on both on forest conservation issues as well as maintaining the quality of the trees in the city. And Annapolis would like to be known as a tree city, but if we don't have someone who's looking at what the health of our trees are and how they may need to be replanted, as well as making sure that we have an intelligent, educated individual when we're using the required forest conservation programs.
That'd be fun. Yes.
So first I'll say, as a city government, one thing that we need to do is make sure that we're efficient and effective. So our departments need to be staffed with the people that are trained and equipped to handle the issues that we need. We should have specialists handling these issues. And whenever it comes down to ensuring the quality of trees and ensuring that they're planted, and we need to have those extra mechanisms in place for accountability, because that goes hand in hand with a lot of these development issues that we're having. We need to ensure that we have the right vegetation going in, that we are ensuring its longevity, because truly what's the point of planting a tree if it dies? What's the point of planting a tree if it's not going to enrich the area? But we need the tree. So we need to ensure that we have the right people who know what we need to do and that we have accountability in that same vein.
Yeah, so Earl's right. Currently, that position is vacant. But I think also what I would want to have somebody in there who, because we strengthened the law, and I think we still need to get back and touch base with the new forester, whoever they hire, but also the rest of the planning and zoning staff who now have the responsibility of implementing that law. Make sure they understand every part of it, because we did try to put in there a number of provisions that make it more transparent, to give the public more opportunity to comment, but also restrict in some cases how much discretion staff had. So that's another thing I'd like to do is protect, and I'm sort of personal here, but to get whistleblower protection passed in this city, because staff needs to feel free to do their professional job, do what they are hired to do. They should not have to deal with political pressure from appointees, people appointed by the mayor. They need to be able to do a professional job. So that also requires a bit of a culture change within the city government. But a part of that I want to say is the plan and zoning did get, so the mayor reorganized various departments. And so he got rid of the chief of environmental programs and didn't replace it. And he changed the forester position into somebody who just looks at residential trees instead of development trees, because they're two different jobs. And through all those old duties and with plan and zoning, with no new staff. So if people are concerned about permit times, we need to make sure, and not to mention concern with protecting our environment, but we need to make sure our departments are adequately staffed. So that's something I would look at too. It may mean that we don't, I want to support the police and fire, but we also need to take care of those other parts of our quality of life, such as protecting our forests and our environment.
I can't let the two of you, we're getting down here, we want to save some time for each of you to have a closing statement, but given my interest and history with the city, I really want you to speak, at least I'd like to spend a week, but let's spend the last 2 minutes on one question about what are your perceptions about, to be corny, but it's carried a message, this Annapolis is the tale of two cities. I know your ward is more fortunate than most in terms of the kinds of issues that you face inside the ward, but the ward is part of a city with tremendous needs for improving housing that's getting increasingly substandard, populations who are isolated, populations who can't go fishing because the police chase them away. All of that world that, I know this is a big 2-minute question, but what about it? What do you think an older person can do to begin to heal some of our own divisions right here in the city of Annapolis? Now, who would like to go first on that? Rob's on it. Okay.
Yeah, so my last story with those three boys shows how, that shows the division right now we have between two Annapolises. We have people with more money who have clear access, or even mobility, right? That's important. We need to make sure people have access to be able to get to where they want. They can get downtown. A lot of the housing communities are fenced off. They're sort of like reservations out here on the edge of town with not the best way, with no good way in terms of getting downtown. They can pay for a taxi, but they're out there because they don't have much money to begin with, right? So that gets back to one of my campaign themes of improving mobility, improving the pedestrian network, improving the bike paths, because we have all these speaking events are blaring together into, but if I mentioned the bicycle master plan that was adopted by the council in 2011, nothing was done with it. It's still sitting on a shelf. But that plan, it shows exactly where the city needs to get the money, outside money. It shows exactly what they need to do over the next few years to implement and get bike infrastructure. So that kind of thing, I think maybe we can even put in like a bike share at some of these public housing communities, and so people can take their bikes into town. So I'm known as the environmentalist, but like I've said, those issues mesh together social justice, environmental justice. Even back when I was in college, I was involved with defending the janitors who they were trying to outsource the services. I was involved with trying to get a rail trail in, and there was hesitancy to get in a rail trail in because of the black kids downtown, right? So that's something, and even here in the state, I've been working on issues trying to restore the right of felons, former felons, to vote in the state, and we succeeded in that fight years ago. So
I'm afraid that's it.
That's it.
That's it. I know that was a big question for 2 minutes.
Well, I will say that this is the area that I shine in. This is what I do. I work in the community, and I bring people together towards certain causes. For me, I am all devoted to ensuring that our communities are uniting. This, for me, is something that, when I moved to the East Coast, I guess I had certain assumptions about the East Coast, right? Certain assumptions that this was like the Northeastern coast, and we're very progressive. And this is a very divided city. It's very divided in a way that is kind of appalling to me. And so I found it really interesting as I delved deeper into these issues, and I learned of this wonderful history of Annapolis and horrible history of Annapolis, that these issues have been going on for a long time with movement. We've had some great movement, but there is so much more that we need to do to bring our communities together. We do need to remove fences that separate communities that are less desirable. And we need to make sure that our schools are welcoming and really, truly integrating our communities. I think that's a big way that we can really make a difference, is improving our schools and improving our recreation options, so we have all parts of our community coming together in singular places and being neighbors. I think at the city level, we need to ensure as alder people that we are reaching out to everyone in the city and making sure that we're being responsive to everyone, because whenever people feel like their voice isn't heard, they stop voting. They stop showing up to meetings, and they stop caring, because what's the point? So I think that that'll be part of our challenge, but I'm happy to take that on, because for me, it's all about community, it's all about public service, and it's all about helping other people. And I think whoever your next alder person will be needs to understand that that should be a priority.
Thank you. Tired? Okay. You only got one more thing to do, and that is to take 3 minutes and do whatever closing statement you would like to make. You can do anything you want, touch on a topic we didn't ask you about. I would assume you want to tell these folks why they should vote for you, what it is that you think makes you the candidate.
We have a hard time hearing you back here.
Pardon me?
We have a hard time hearing you.
I can hear you.
They can't hear you.
I'm having a hard time hearing you too. This is dead. It is. They're going to do closing statements now. That's all I was saying. And
We've been having difficulty here understanding what you're saying.
okay. We're about done, so that's coming to an end. But I think we've all struggled with these mics. With that, so Rob, let's have you won the toy class. You get to start and finish and go first.
Okay.
Shout it out. Yours works, I think, but.
I wanted to take the advantage to go back a little bit to the last question, because I wanted to also mention, in my Hamlet, the very first thing I got printed, I put in there the importance of, I want to make sure that all city contractors and city employees get paid a living wage. That's very important to me, because I feel like people who need to be able to afford to live here. We had a situation where, actually I probably don't have time to get into details, but another thing I support is affordable housing. The city, again, I think I said the city gives too many variances on the moderately priced dwelling unit program. We need to stop that. We need to give people a way out of some of the public housing to bring us together as a community. So, jumping into my closer here, I think we are, like Trudy said, I think it's good. We're in a good situation here where you have two good candidates to choose from, but there are differences which I want to try to highlight in terms of my background and strengths. Again, I'm an environmental scientist. That's a perspective that brings forward orientation on data, on objectivity. I'm also a community organizer, which has that orientation on the public. I want to bring those together to advocate for change for you. And also, again, I brought up that story about the whistleblowing because I feel that shows that I'm proven commitment to you, to the ward. That is something I stood up for that was happening in the ward. That development was in the ward. Again, that was a great risk to my family and my career to do that. And again, I think that shows the kind of integrity that I will have in office. But it also shows, coming out of that, my ability to get things done. We have a brand new park coming out of that whole situation, right next to Quietwaters Park. We have brand new Forest Conservation Act ordinances that are passed because of that. We have the adequate public facilities that addresses the school overcrowding. I've worked on cleanups around the school and worked with Back Creek Conservancy on those cleanups. So those are just examples of things how I feel like I've shown that I can get things done for you. So I'm asking you to vote for me because of that vision for a better Ward 7 and a better city. And as I wrote in the paper, I feel like Ward 7 is really the maritime soul of Annapolis. We've got the largest number of boats on our shores. We have the largest maritime industrial district here, and we have the beautiful Back Creek. But that shows that we need a strong voice. We need a strong voice for our ward. We need a strong voice for those boys, the fishermen boys that I mentioned. We need a strong voice for everyone here. And so we'll just finish with a quote. Well, first I'll say I will do my best to be that voice for you. And I want to finish a quote by Helen Keller that says, "Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much." Thank you all for your time and for coming.
Votes. So, when it comes down to it, we both have very similar visions and ideas for the city. But the reason I'm running and the reason that I am the most qualified to lead us into this future is because I am somebody who has worked in the community for a long time. I've worked with many different groups of people. I've worked on socioeconomic issues. I have raised thousands of dollars for homeless, for opioid crisis issues. I have worked to ensure that we are taking care of our homeless by volunteering, and I've organized community cleanups. I've organized a few just outside of our ward. These are things, for me, that are the heart and soul of everything that we should do. We should care about our neighbors, and we should be willing to go out there and help them whenever they need it most, even if they don't ask for it. And so, whether it's helping children or helping the homeless or giving back to the community by cleaning up the environment, I think that these items these activities just show that I have a commitment to getting these things done. Even whenever I was going to school, my husband was deployed, I was raising a baby, and I was working full time, I was volunteering. I was serving on boards. I was leading the direction of organizations to serve the community because it is that important to me, and I am willing to learn anything that I don't yet know and get the job done. I will build those relationships as I've done for years, and I will ensure that we find a way forward together because only together can we get things done. So I will say also, some people call it the woman card, but I'm going to be honest. Whenever we have conversations, there are times whenever I hear the male alderman making a decision, and I don't hear a certain voice there. The voice that says, well, what about provisions for the poor? What about provisions for Spanish-speaking children? We're not hearing those conversations take place in a way that they are addressing those communities and populations that are often ignored. And women, mothers, working families, we think about these things. We think about these things, and so it's important to me to, bring that voice to the council and bring a working person to council, which obviously you'd have in both of us, which I think is important. We need people who are living the everyday life here in Annapolis, and I believe that I am the person that, can best represent our needs here in the ward. So thank you.
Completely dead, to say to both of you, I hope you found that enlightening. I thought you both did a superb job, and it makes me feel very encouraged about new people entering the council. And I think in Pfeiffer, it was a fine alderman here. I thought maybe he would come and we could give him a hand. But if he's watching on streaming, I think he did a good job representing the ward. But I think the future is bright, and I appreciate all the hard work and energy you put in to answer these questions. And to those of you who came, thank you very much. You're a precious breed in Ward 7, and we appreciate your interest, and encourage your friends and neighbors who are registered voters to pay attention and get out and vote. And let's give them all